Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolutions Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, SHERI Horn Hasan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, and I'm coming to you on July 21st, 2022 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. First, I'll go through my usual housekeeping stuff a little more quickly than usual. Just to tell you, you can listen to this podcast by going to my website at karmicevolution.com and clicking on the upper right-hand banner under podcast. And from there, you can scroll down the page and hear the most recent show and or search the archive listings for past shows you might have missed or to which you'd like to listen again. And while you're there, you'll now see the most recently posted show and a downloadable freebie labeled How to Keep Your Sun Sign Happy, which is friendly advice for every sun sign from renowned astrologer Stephen Forrest about what each of us needs to, each sun sign, each zodiacal sign needs to be happy. It's based on an interview I did with Stephen a couple of years ago about depression in the chart, and he's given me permission to distribute it more widely as a means of promoting how valid astrology is in our lives. And yes, it will sign you up for my weekly Conversations About Consciousness astrology newsletter, but you can, of course, unsubscribe anytime. So be sure to grab it when you listen to this podcast, whether you do so when it's current or after the fact on the archives. And enjoy, please, some words of astrological wisdom. Separately, you can always follow me on my Facebook page at Karmic Evolution for Your Soul, where you can read all my astrologically oriented posts. And finally, I continue to offer my discounted Karmic Evolution 1-hour natal insight reading to listeners only for only $99. So if you're interested in astrology and want to learn more about the true meaning of your individual chart, this is the reading for you. Now, your individual chart is, of course, essentially a snapshot of the exact position of the planets at the precise moment and location of your birth, and it reveals a great deal about you, believe it or not, when you use it as a tool for soul growth. My Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading can be tremendously helpful for learning things like your soul's true purpose in this lifetime, what is your highest destiny in this lifetime, and how can you best move forward towards it. Such a reading identifies patterns of behavior that originated either in early life and or during past lives that affect your current relationships, your career or your job choices, your finances and or your health, but that these patterns no longer serve your soul's karmic journey forward. The reading also can give you insights into what tripped you up in the past and how to entertain new perspectives and gain greater awareness through this kind of astrological insight to bring greater happiness and satisfaction into your life. So all this is easy when you take advantage of the discounted Karmic Evolution 1-hour natal insight reading for only $99. You'll find easy access to this offer on my website at karmicevolution.com/karmic99. And as I love to say, at almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. All right, lots to cover. So let's get into this week's astro news you can use. The monthly lunar phase is currently waning still since the July 13th Capricorn full moon, which asked us, as you know, because I've said this already, to release any attachment to our infantile self and habitual behavior that no longer serves us moving forward. So we're still in this period. We might contemplate during the rest of this lunar cycle until we hit next week's July 28th Leo new moon, how the Cancer new moon on June 28th asked us to plant seeds. It asked us, not asks us, but asked us to plant seeds of greater self-compassion so that we might see our, hurtful wounds, the things that we're sensitive about that cause us pain, as nothing to be ashamed of or guilty for, and to allow ourselves to use our past pain, not to fall back onto negative soul conditioned behaviors that have become ingrained in our unconscious, but rather to release our self-nurturing in healthier ways than simply hiding our pain from the world. And this would enable us to treat ourselves with as much sensitivity and compassion as we might treat others, and in doing so begin to help to truly heal our inner child. So the Capricorn full moon on July 13th asked us to release any uber sensitivity and past habitual emotional hiding, because when we do so, we tend to hide behind nurturing others instead of ourselves. We don't want to deal with our own pain, so we deal with the pain of others, which of course is completely socially acceptable, especially if you earn your living that way as a caretaker or as a nurse or a doctor or anyone in the actual medical profession, or a metaphysical healing profession. But the purpose of the Capricorn full moon is to help us be able to come out of the Cancerian self-protective shell and to deal with any hurt, whether it's past or present, with a stronger sense of responsibility for taking care of ourselves first and others second. Now, this more mature view of our life ultimately strengthens us emotionally against any future slings and arrows of misfortune that might befall us, as I noted last week, like my little Shakespeare quote there, partial Shakespeare quote. We marked the third quarter of this is the waning third quarter of this current monthly lunar cycle yesterday on July 20th, when the Aries moon formed a cardinal square to the Cancer sun, which when looked at politically, because both the moon and the zodiacal sign Cancer, which is dignified when the moon is in Cancer, represent, quote unquote, the people in mundane astrology. And Aries indicates action, and the sun, the taking of action on behalf of the people. And because of that, we saw some action here in the U.S., at least legislatively. So the U.S. House of Representatives passed a marriage equality bill with, I might add, a surprising amount of Republicans voting for it. I think it was something like 47, in a definite reaction to the Supreme Court's recent decision to abolish Roe versus Wade and the right of women to have autonomy over their own bodies. And shortly after that decision came down, as many of you know, Justice Clarence Thomas made statements that the court might move on to abolish the Obergefell decision, which granted the constitutional right to same-sex marriage, and that again, might be next on the court's agenda in addition to other things. Now, I haven't said this publicly before, but, some of us are waiting for Clarence Thomas to use his originalist interpretation of the Constitution to get to the point where, the original Constitution didn't necessarily consider Black people equals, and that it was illegal to have an interracial marriage at some point in different places in this country, and that perhaps his entire marriage, because he's married to Ginny Thomas, who is a white woman, and clearly Clarence Thomas is a Black man, that perhaps that will become illegal under his agenda. Okay, enough with the snark. Anyway, whether this proposed legislation for the marriage equality that passed the House is doomed in the Senate or not remains to be seen, but it illustrates how, especially as we approach the fall eclipses on October 25th and November 8th, how such actions may well influence the U.S. midterm elections, which occur on the same day as the eclipse on November 8th. Now, we also saw the announcement that a bipartisan group of U.S. senators have agreed upon proposed legislation to reform the Electoral Count Act, which now includes, according to this proposal, stronger language that clearly says that the vice president is an electoral vote counter and nothing more. This, of course, is in reaction to the January 6th insurrection and the pressure that caused that whole Capitol riot by former President Donald Trump, who was urging and encouraging his Vice President Mike Pence to reject slates of certain states' electors by sending them back to the states for revision. So such a move would clearly have been in violation of the existing Electoral Count Act, but the new proposed legislation further clarifies the vice president's role with greater certainty. It makes several other minor changes too, but I'm not going to go into that now. It's easy to Google that. So let's look now at the fact that wounded healer Chiron stationed retrograde the other day on July 19th. And that was just after Mercury entered Leo on the same day. Now, Mercury remains in Leo, where he'll be joined by the Sun tomorrow, July 22nd. But Chiron appears to move backwards until December 23rd. I think this is a sentence I didn't finish. I mean, Mercury remains in Leo only until August. Hang on a second, because I had it, I thought, written down. It's a short stint for Mercury in Leo. He's fiery, so he's moving fast. I think it's August. Hang on. It's like August 4th. He moves into Virgo August 4th. So he's not really in Leo for too long. In any case, we'll get into that in a minute. But meanwhile, Chiron, which stationed retrograde July 19th, doesn't station direct again until December 23rd. So that's a long haul. And let's remember that Chiron in Aries represents wounds around our freedom of expression. Mars-ruled Aries is about our personal will and the instinct to move freely. So hang on. So it's why in Western tropical astrology, the zodiac starts with 0 Aries, and Mars's rulership of the sign of Aries makes it the ruler of the natural ascendant and the first house of the natural zodiacal wheel. That's because we set the ascendant, descendant, and the midheaven and the IC to the solstices and the what are they called? I didn't write it down, so I can't remember it. The summer solstice and the autumnal and spring equinox. There you go. Okay. So the ascendant in our charts marks the point of birth. And that's whether, basically it's for an individual, for a country, for an organization, a corporation, whatever. And that point of birth for each of us individually is reflected through the exact date, the exact time, and the exact location, meaning the longitude and latitude of our birth. Now, we superimpose whatever sign the sun was moving through at that exact moment of our birth over the Aries ascendant, meaning that house may have 2 rulers. So Mars Aries is the underlay, if you will. It always rules the natural chart, while the sign and planetary ruler of our specific individual chart's ascendant becomes our overlay. So no matter how you slice it, even if your ascendant is in, say, dreamier, more spiritually inclined Pisces, meaning it's ruled by Neptune in modern astrology, or Jupiter in traditional, the Piscean energy that you came in with combines with the martial energy of Mars and Aries in that ascendant of first house. So the ascendant and the first house in everyone's chart represents the act of being born and of the fetus choosing to signal instinctively to the mother that it's time to come out into the world. The mother goes into labor and all goes well, the child is born. You have a chart because you're here, right? Those with Saturn ruled Capricorn rising, just for example, might have been a bit slow to emerge from the womb, while those with an Aries ascendant, meaning that they'd have double Aries energy, because, you know, when you superimpose your chart's Aries energy, first house Aries rising over the natural chart, you get a lot of Aries energy. So that birth may have been quick. The birth story, of course, always lies with the rest of the chart's configuration, so there's no guarantee to what I'm saying, but it's just an interesting thing to contemplate, right? So since Chiron entered Aries on April 17th of 2018, although he retrograded from September 25th of that year until February 18th, 2019, where he remains in Aries until June 29th, 2026. And since then, since April 17th of 2018, we've been asked to give voice to our deepest, most painful wounds in the attempt to try to heal them. Now, the interesting thing about Chiron is that he represents the wound which never heals. Without going into the whole mythology of it, an explanation of what kind of body Chiron is, which is also easy to find elsewhere, the deal with Chiron is that we really can never fully heal our wounds. But we find that we start to do so and make progress in doing so when we seek out others who suffer from the same or similar wounding. That's the key here, especially since the wound when Chiron moves through Aries is to our natural instinct to move or express ourselves freely. Just like I said, it's the baby that signals through the hormones, the Pitocin, whatever, that it's time to come out. If we didn't do that, we don't come out. And Mars, of course, which rules Aries, the sign that Chiron is transiting through, is the planet of action. It encompasses our drive, our ambition, our motivation, and the ability to assert ourselves. So when Chiron's in Aries, he's making us focus on where such natural instincts might fail us because we've been in some way wounded, again, either earlier in this lifetime or in past lives. So we're tasked not only during the entire 8-year Chiron and Aries transit, but also during its retrograde periods, to become more conscious about these wounds so that we may begin to heal them by, again, seeking out others who suffer similarly. And in short, our Mars Aries energy to act and react instinctually and instinctively. I've mentioned before, if a baseball is hurtling at your face at 100 miles an hour, it's Mars that allows us to put our hands up and block our nose from getting broken or whatever, right? So we want to, during this retrograde period in particular, but, well, I'm saying Mars energy to act and react instinctively, and it instinctively has been wounded, right? So anyone born with Chiron in Aries or Chiron in Mars Aries ruled first house has this similarity. And as Melanie Reinhardt points out in her wonderful book, Chiron and the Healing Journey, a wounded Mars, meaning Chiron in Aries, tends to look like a Libra. So what does she mean by that? Well, Reinhardt says that with Chiron and Aries, the basic wound revolves around, and here I quote, our right to exist. End quote. If this sense that one has the right to exist is wounded, and here I'm quoting from her book again, then a self-assertion and initiative may be accompanied by the fear of non-being. Therefore, we may feel that we only exist as a mirror to someone else, which is an echo of the 7th house. We only feel motivated to champion a cause on someone else's behalf, like a knight in shining armor, but with no will of our own. Grandiose displays of bravado and fighting spirit compensate for the pain, self-doubt, and fear underneath, which could drive us into a repeating cycle of futile and self-destructive behavior endeavors. We tend to take action prematurely, translating emotional tension immediately into action. End quote. But she further says, and I quote again, we may wound ourselves with a militant sense of self-sufficiency, becoming unable to ask for help and support in our conviction that we must go it alone. End quote. Now, this is interesting in terms of the collective when we consider that on May 8th, 2018, then President Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal from 2015, an agreement that had been reached by 7 countries after more than 2 years of grueling negotiations. And at that time, Trump also announced that the United States would reimpose the same stringent sanctions on Iran before this deal was signed, and that he'd even add newer penalties. And along with Trump's grumblings about removing the U.S. from the NATO alliance, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was formed in 1949 by the United States, Canada, and several Western European nations to provide each other with collective security, both Americans and the rest of the world became aware of the U.S.'s more isolationist stance, which continued until Trump's term ended in 2021 when Joe Biden officially became the new U.S. president. So we see this reflection of going it alone, right? And if you study any American history, you know that America was originally known as an isolationist nation, in part because of its geography, you know, being removed from its colonists, original colonists out of Europe. Hang on. So I just lost my place. Technology is just not my friend today. I'm telling you. I get calls from friends who are having technological difficulties, and I'm like, you think I'm going to solve them? Oh, yeah, do you mind? Yeah, I'll listen to you. I'll cry with you, but I can't solve your technical problems. I got enough of my own. Okay. So the other thing that I've noticed with clients, friends, or family members who have Chiron in Aries or in their first house, and also particularly conjunct their ascendant, is that often the wound to the Aries principle displays as similar to the shadow side of Libra, meaning rather we may prefer compromise and cooperation over exerting our personal preferences. So when we then compensate for this fear of assertion by becoming either passive aggressive, or because we can see both our own and another's point of view, we become indecisive to a fault. Now, both are confrontation delaying tactics that usually blow up in our face at some point. So say if we're passive aggressive and we just continually sweep our personal will, desires, and, you know, ways in which we would otherwise want to express or assert ourselves under the rug for too long, we're eventually left with a giant mound of resentment that at some point can no longer be hidden and therefore avoided. And then we find ourselves in an explosive situation with a partner, which is exactly what we chose to try to avoid in the first place. And in terms of indecision, well, you know, not making a choice is making a choice not to make a choice. In other words, if you don't make a choice, you've left it to someone else to make that choice for you. And that means in turn, when you turn around and you don't like the choice they made, ooh, you have two choices. You either have to confront them, which is what you didn't want to do in the first place, or you end up in an argument. Or you end up exhibiting passive-aggressive tendencies. So in a sense, given that Chiron entered Aries, as I said, in April of 2018, which also just happened to coincide with President Trump's administrative reign from early 2017 to early 2021, we can see how he chose to send love letters to North Korea's dictator, Kim Jong-un, snuggle up to Russia's autocratic Vladimir Putin and others like him, while at the same time withdrawing the U.S. from more wide-ranging mutual partnerships with longer-term benefits. We can also see how these chickens are coming home to roost. For example, Trump's decision to withhold arms from Ukraine during that period to try to coerce the new president, Vladimir Zelensky, there to finger Joe Biden's son in some kind of conspiracy, and how this worked to Russia's advantage. In other words, I like strong men, right? You know, if I ally myself with them, I guess I appear to be stronger, don't I? But I'm not going to be strong on my own. I'm just going to pretend, right? So this may even have planted the seeds for the Russian invasion and or the war against Ukraine now, as many of us know. The delay in the arms shipments that Congress had passed didn't come, and that was the subject of Trump's one of Trump's many impeachments. So such withdrawal from agreements with others only to exert ourselves on someone else's behalf would seem to fit with the description by Melanie Reinhardt of Chiron and Aries. And now, however, as we move into its retrograde period, again until December 23rd, we're tasked with moving inward in order to gain greater consciousness about the true derivation of any of our wounds or wounds to our feeling that we have no right to exist, as Melanie Reinhardt puts it. And she gives us another clue from her book when she writes, and here again I quote, sometimes the early environment of those with Chiron in the first house or Aries is hostile and full of suppressed or overt aggression, which compounds feelings of timidity and lack of self-worth and personal rights. Then survival becomes equated with learning how to please and placate others. Again, a Libra, that's the end of her quote, and this is me talking. Again, a Libra in the seventh house trait, which is to compromise rather than fight for our right to assert ourselves in a healthy way. So since Chiron's in Mars ruled Aries, its retrograde period asks us to go deep within to find our inner warrior and to ascertain how and why it's been wounded. It's not for the purpose of perpetuating blame or our own shame or guilt, but rather simply to extract it from the hidden underworld of our unconscious and to bring it into the light of greater consciousness. Now, I'll mention here, but not going to, I will be tackling this obviously in far greater depth later on at the end of the summer or early September. Mars will be going retrograde in September and through, I'm not sure if it's January 12th of 2023, but sometime in January. And that is also going to be, to a certain extent, about us going inward to find our inner warrior. And because it's in Mercury's, the Mercury ruled Gemini, it's about speaking. It's about, communicating. It's about telling our story. So, because only then can we begin to heal ourselves, both in the act of helping heal others and right now, because Mercury's in Leo as of the 19th, and the sun's moving into Leo tomorrow on July 22nd. So we can begin our healing process. I mean, it's always ongoing, right? But in relationship to Chiron's retrograde station, we do so by sharing our personal stories with others. With Chiron, the purpose is always a dual one. While we don't want to sacrifice healing our own wounds by only paying attention to those of others, we also don't want to continue to hide our light behind a bushel out of a sense of not being worthy enough to have an opinion or to take a stand and express ourselves freely. And this, of course, is what the sun's transit through Leo is all about, freedom of expression. The sun's entrance into Leo tomorrow on the 22nd ushers in a month of fiery self-expression and calls us to share our individual stories, as I've already said, not for personal recognition, not for fame, but rather to reinforce our unique solar individuality. Now, traditional astrologers refer to the sun as dignified in Leo, meaning it's best able to most easily express Leo energy when the sun is going through its own sign. And since the sun rules Leo, which is the archetypal sign of creativity, children, romance, risk-taking, recreation, and sports, the sun represents our will to live. We go back to the Mars ruled ascendant now, right? Without the will to be born, How can we have the will to live? And it's this kind of energy that our sun needs to sustain itself, to go through its soul's karmic evolution. So it's what's born at the ascendant through the Aries archetype, which is also exalted when the sun is transiting through that sign, meaning it expresses itself second in power only to the sun in Leo. So while the sun revolves around our essential being, our ego identity, our persona, it expresses itself in Leo through pride in ourselves and our own creations, be they human, artistic, scientific, or otherwise. I mean, creativity should not be thought of only in terms of the fine arts. A lot of people will say, I'm not creative. I don't have a creative bone in my body, because they think I don't paint, I don't dance, I don't sing, I don't play the piano, and they're missing the point, right? Because if we think of creativity in that narrow definition, we miss the true depth and breadth of the sun's archetypal rulership with the sign of Leo. Also, just as an aside, the planet Mars, which, as I said, rules the zodiacal sign Aries, is considered to be the planet that supports the sun in all of its endeavors. In other words, the highest and best use of Mars energy in our own charts is to support our will to live and love, and to defend and protect our right to express ourselves with the reckless abandon of a child, for example, creatively in whatever form that takes. So we can't fail to notice either what I've just talked about vis-a-vis Chiron's retrograde in Aries, which is that now we may add to the mix the fact that getting into greater conscious touch with our deeply hidden wounds between now and December 23rd aids us not only in being able to speak out and share our stories with others, but indicates that while the sun is in Leo, we may wear these past wounds as a badge of honor rather than a cross of shame. And it's Mars rulership of Aries as Chiron transits through that sign that supports the Leo sun in this mission, at least until August 22nd, when the sun crosses into Virgo. I'm not sure if that's the 21st or 22nd, so don't quote me on that. But so we're energized now, as well as at the upcoming July 28th Leo new moon next week, to be seen and heard, and to give up any tendency to hide. As I said to a friend the other day, Leo energy always reminds me of something I heard Lady Gaga say, although honestly I have no idea if this is an original quote, but I remember hearing her say a few years ago, God don't make junk. All right? We all have something, an aptitude, a talent, or some other kind of gift about which we may, can, and should be proud. As Chiron retrogrades now, along with Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, Juno, which is the goddess asteroid of partnership, and Vesta, the goddess asteroid representing the woman beholden to no man, as well as the priestess who keeps the hearth fire burning so we may always find our way home, we turn inward to better understand our wounds, what provides us a true sense of security, that's Saturn, what is our true connection to spirituality and the collective, collective suffering and collective healing, Neptune, and where we might benefit from less compromise and more speaking our piece in relationships, Chiron, to finally where we might assert our right to honor Mother Nature's cycles of the divine feminine, which include, of course, bodily autonomy, regardless of what gender that body is or chooses to be. So the heat is on. We simply have to be strong enough to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause of expressing this uniquely individual creator solar self that we all contain right now. Now, Mercury in Leo trine Jupiter in Aries on July 23rd, lends mental sharpness to us now and makes us able to view all possibilities inherent in any particular situation. So we're motivated to organize future successful plans, especially around business, education, and the law, but we're cautioned not to overlook seemingly irrelevant or pesky details that might trip us up later. And Venus in Cancer square to Jupiter in Aries on July 24th or 25th, depending, of course, on your actual time zone, cautions us also to integrate any inner tensions between our emotionally driven values, Venus in Cancer, particularly around children and family, and consistent also with the current Leo themes right now, with those of a more moralistic and legally restrictive society now, which is Jupiter in Aries. Jupiter in Aries is marching into hell for a heavenly cause, or so it thinks. So we want to investigate now what is our cause and why, right? So we're capable of investing wisely with this Venus square to Jupiter. We're capable of making wise investments now, right? But that's as long as we give some clear thought to the long-term value of what we're investing in, and also avoid acting on impulse. Venus and Jupiter are kind of like, how much is enough? And the answer is no much. So when Mercury in Leo forms a fixed square to Mars in Taurus next week on July 26th, we might find ourselves defending our values against a kind of blustery, righteous oratory now. You know, this is a recipe for arguments. So such arguments should definitely not be had in a car or when one is wielding heavy, sharp, or hot equipment of any kinds, because accidents, especially while moving or traveling, might manifest now. So it's best to act and react slowly and with thought. There's plenty of time to compose a Dear John letter or to kill people with kindness rather than lashing out at them immediately. If someone else is accosting you, it's best to sidestep the situation as best you can and live to fight another day. And Mercury's known for his sleight of hand, so don't change lanes quickly without looking in your rear and side view mirrors. Don't race somebody for that parking spot, and do use your soothing verbal charm to calm others down, if possible, and without incurring further wrath. If not, hightail it out of there before any arguments escalate to beyond your control. Sorry, water time. And July 26th happens to be the same day that the mean north node, that's the calculation of the average or mean rate of movement of the transiting karmic nodal axis, meets up with Uranus at 18 degrees and 34 minutes of Taurus at approximately 12:50 p.m. Pacific time and 3:50 p.m. Eastern time. Now, Uranus hits the true north node, which is calculated by the true position of the nodes at any given moment in time, between about noon on July 31st and noon on August 1st, and at between 18 degrees and 44 minutes and 18 degrees and 35 minutes. The nodes are going backwards, remember. Either way, be on the lookout between all those dates. So starting on July 26th and going through till, August 1st, but even then some, which I'll explain in a minute, for any sudden shocks or surprises, regardless of whether they're happy, sad, or anything in between. Technically, when a planet conjoins with the north node of karmic destiny, it's usually considered a positive, even if, since it's Uranus, it may not seem that way at the time. So the key here is to look at your natal Uranus by house and realize that this is where the energy of this transit, or basically any Uranus transit to your chart really, originates. Then consider the house or houses of the Uranus transit, where the transit is occurring in your natal chart, to any other point, planet, angle, or other sensitive point in your chart. This represents where the situation is playing out now. And finally, look to the house or houses ruled by the transiting planet or planets, as this is where the outcome will eventually be revealed. So in this case, look to the house that contains your natal Uranus. Since the North Node, I originally said it has no ruler, but that's not really true. It has no house rulership, but the ruler of the North Node right now is Venus. And Venus rules Taurus and Libra. So you want to look at the houses ruled by Venus as Taurus and Libra. Next, you want to look at what house has Aquarius, the ruler of the sign ruled by Uranus, on the cusp, house or houses, to see where the ultimate effects of this transit will be felt. For example, say you have Uranus in your 11th house. The issue revolves around your natal energy of perhaps not having felt accepted by groups, including groups of friends, maybe from the time you were young. As a result, perhaps you followed your own path, formed your own group, or simply developed unconventional relationships with unconventional people. So let's say transiting Uranus is meeting the Taurus North Node in your 9th house of higher learning, law, philosophy, religion, divination, and foreign travel and culture. Then this is where the issue will play out now in the short term. Perhaps a sudden opportunity to travel, to study, to learn new metaphysical subjects like astrology or divination, etc., or to delve into a certain specific philosophy, maybe a legal one or a religious practice, something like that might occur. And if Uranus, say, rules your 6th house of health, service, and daily routine, which is often considered a work house in terms of how you spend your daily time, that might mean that the long-term effect of this Uranus North Node transit might be as a result of something you learn, a legal situation, travel, newfound religious or philosophical beliefs, and that this will somehow change your daily routine, whether that's related to literal work or not. Or perhaps it's the travel and or the study that broadens your horizons in ways that ultimately benefit your health, and there's a change in your routine related to that which keeps your body healthy. 6th house is, of course, Mercury's Virgo's domain, and that would relate to diet, exercise, the kicking of bad habits. Could also be a change of job or taking up a new hobby or something of that nature. Now, astrologer Celeste Teal, in her book Lunar Nodes, Discover Your Soul's Karmic Mission, interprets a Uranus North Node conjunction like this, and here again I quote, "Unexpected situations that arise are usually of some personal advantage. Chance meetings and circumstances develop. Unusual ideas or unconventional methods are entered into. Involvement in activities ruled by Uranus goes well. The matters of the house ruled by Uranus tend to take on an expansion factor or elevation from this transit. If Uranus goes retrograde around this time, it may make multiple passes within a year or so." Well, guess what, everybody? Uranus is scheduled to station retrograde at 18 degrees and 55 minutes of Taurus on August 24th. And that means it will reconjoin the sensitized North Node conjunction degree between about September 14th to the 22nd, give or take, and again after it stations direct on January 22nd of 2023. And it hits that same degree again on approximately somewhere between May 3rd and May 6th, again, depending on the north or the true node or the mean node of 2023. So Uranus won't reconjoin the North Node in Taurus, but rather it will hit the same degree of its conjunction happening soon, which has become sensitized for the future. Now, the other thing to watch for is that Mars will conjoin Uranus in the Taurus North Node around August 1st. And here's how astrologer Naomi Bennett explains it in her recent Facebook post. Now, she's going to go into some other stuff that is not going to be explainable, but it's stuff you can look up too. And this is a quote. "This month and the first half of August, Uranus is slowing down to go retrograde in August. It's almost stationary at 18 degrees Taurus for more than 3 months at this degree, which is on the helio nodes of Mars at 19 degrees Taurus Scorpio. That creates a Mars-Uranus period of time that is volatile and explosive. The mean lunar nodes are in aspect to these same degrees for all of July and into mid-August. And that's not all. Transiting Mars comes to join Uranus from July 17th through August 5th. That's a slightly longer time period than I gave. Then Mars marches on to square Saturn from August 4th to August 13th. And the ephemeris notes the exact date of this Mars-Uranus North Node conjunction as August 1st. The fifth factor is a moon wobble, which is a lunar bending that's centered on August 9th. This is one of the most stressful periods of the year. And again, I'm quoting from Naomi Bennett's post, especially for those with major placements around 17 to 22 degrees of the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Historically, there is a high incidence of plane crashes when Uranus is with the lunar nodes and near a moon wobble or eclipse. At the very least, we can expect more gun violence and possible explosions in the world or in one's personal life. Wars begin and end during moon wobbles and eclipses. It's a period of big news events. When Mars is with Uranus, tempers can flare and accidents happen. Not to mention that the moon is out of bounds, another thing we'll deal with another time, between August 7th and the 9th, and Mars and Uranus have the same declination at 17 degrees north. Now the sun is at 15 degrees north on the 9th, that's August 9th, with the moon wobble. This may be the apex date rather than August 1st, when Mars is exact conjunct Uranus. It's generally best not to react to provocation, but to delay one's actions until the intensity passes. I'll post more as we get closer to each three exact aspects. So you guys might want to check out Naomi Bennett on Facebook. And she continues here, on a more personal level, these two conjunctions, oh no, I'm sorry, this is me. That was the end of her quote. All right. So on a more personal level, these two conjunctions put me in mind, Uranus and Mars, and Uranus and Mars to the North Node, put me in mind of evolutionary astrologer Stephen Forrest's delineation of natal Uranus North Node conjunctions and natal Mars North Node conjunctions, which is something I think we just might want to consider a little bit now in terms of what the universe might be asking us, maybe not so much on a personal level, but collectively. So the Uranus North Node conjunction, which actually happens approximately every 15 years, but in different signs, and which means Uranus is opposing the South Node, means that we should seek to further our efforts to individuate. And here I'm quoting from Stephen Forrest's book, The Yesterday's Sky. This conjunction of this Uranus on the North Node, meaning it's opposite the South Node, implies the attainment of a self-sufficient feeling that one's identity is not dependent on any outward social or practical circumstances. End quote. And Mars opposing the South Node natally, but also at this time by transit, this is what I'm extrapolating from what Stephen Forrest delineates, quote, means an individual must experience his or her own power and courage. Physical adventure is very helpful. So are relationships in which it's all right to get angry. Confidence in the inner warrior must be restored. And remember I said we've got Chiron retrograding in Aries, and soon we'll have Mars retrograding in Aries. It's always about the inner warrior when Mars and Aries are involved. There is not an evolutionary need, this is Stephen Forrest talking, to experience violence, but there is a need to experience being capable of self-defense, a sense of being dangerous if crossed. Now, again, based on what I said just before, you leave a situation if it gets volatile, you don't put yourself in harm's way. But he's talking about the inner security, which puts out the vibes that says, don't even try it, buddy. don't even cross that line, all right? Because you think I'm a weakling, but I'm going to prove I'm not. So it's not about actually getting into fights with people. It's about radiating the energy that they don't want to mess with you, right? Now, all of this begins to wax into fruition in conjunction with the Chiron retrograde in Aries, as I said, and with Mercury and the Sun moving into Leo. Again, while so many other planets are retrograde, and as we begin to approach Jupiter's station retrograde at next week's July 28th new moon in Leo, which again reemphasizes the theme of individuation, or being who we actually came here to become. So we'll talk more about both the upcoming lunation and Jupiter's station retrograde next week. But for now, as far as Uranus and Mars are concerned, clearly we're seeing its manifestation in all these crazy heat waves happening, not only through parts of the US, but Europe and India and elsewhere. And it's very clear that things are heating up. So fire is a big thing. In addition, I noticed just within the hour before recording this podcast that the U.S. House of Representatives just passed, mostly along party lines, legislation to codify contraception rights in the wake of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So according to the New York Times, and here I quote, "The measure is almost certain to fail in the evenly divided Senate, where most Republicans are also likely to be opposed. The vote was the latest election year move by Democrats to draw a sharp distinction with Republicans on a social issue that has broad support," end quote. So bear in mind the approaching Uranus North Node transit is happening in Venus-ruled Taurus, and the same with Mars. The archetype of the natural cycles of Mother Nature, as I mentioned before, the physical body and the divine feminine. And that related and Venus is also related to value. So it includes money and our other resources, food, clothing, shelter, land. So Venus represents, of course, relationships and the value we find in having them. And this transit will be ongoing also during the tightening of the Saturn-Uranus square once again between late September and late October of this year, leading into the next pair of eclipses on, as I mentioned earlier, October 25th and the U.S. midterm election day on November 8th. So what happens between now and then, not only with women's rights, but that of same-sex marriage, right to same-sex marriage, with our climate change and our heat waves and anything else that's a result of that, droughts, etc., fires, all that stuff, and that the stock market may surprise us by either losing or gaining value, but it pays to remember that this period may also turn out to be for the best over the long term. It's kind of like saying, well, the Supreme Court decision is crazy, the abolishment of Roe versus Wade and the other things that Clarence Thomas has talked about, but they may spark a revolution that gets us where we need to or want to go, not only want to, but need to go in the long term, right? Without that, we might not have, we might end up with greater rights. We shall see. It's not a prediction, but I do think there's going to be a major fight. So let's all be mindful of taking that long view rather than succumbing to any shorter term shocks, getting depressed or whatever. Oh no, it's gone, like with the stock market or whatever. Everything always comes back. It's just a matter of when. So as always, please try to keep it together by taking the higher route of meditation, prayer, and creative expression now. So that's it for this week. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. I do hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week, July 28th, for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time